I almost threw it away. The folded piece of paper lay just beneath the gap of the hotel room door, slipped in like something that didn't belong to that morning, didn't belong to the atmosphere of wedding preparations, didn't belong to the joy we had built together over the past 2 months. I bent down to pick it up, my mind still occupied with the half-finished layer of mascara and the laughter of the bridesmaids echoing from the end of the hallway where my best friend was getting her hair done for the most important day of her life. We had only 3 hours left before the ceremony began. 3 hours before she stepped into a new life. 3 hours before everything became permanent. I held the piece of paper between my fingers as if it were just a scheduled change from the organizers, a minor inconvenience not worth attention. I even turned toward the trash can. But something made me stop. Not logic. Not any clear reason. Just a very faint but unmistakable feeling, as if someone had brushed against my thoughts and whispered, "Don't." I opened it. And it took only a single short line for everything to begin slipping off its familiar orbit. The message wasn't long. In fact, it was almost too short for what it had just done to me. Asterisk. Before you raise a toast tonight, check your husband's work bag. The front zipped compartment. I'm sorry you have to find out this way. Asterisk. I read it once. Then again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something softer, something harmless, something reasonable. But they didn't change. They stayed exactly where they were, clear and cold like metal just pressed against skin. My first reaction wasn't panic. It was denial. A joke, I told myself. Maybe someone got the wrong room. Maybe it was some stupid act of sabotage in a place full of strangers gathering for a wedding. I set the note down on the edge of the bed, then picked it up again as if its weight might change between touches. Out in the hallway, laughter still drifted in light and bright as though nothing had slipped out of orbit. But inside me something had already settled. Not fear. Something else. A stillness. Deep. Hollow. A space where some part of me had already begun to understand long before I was ready to accept it. That I might not be able to return to who I was just minutes ago. I didn't walk over to the bag right away. I sat still on the edge of the bed, the note still in my hand, trying to breathe the way I had learned to when something unnamed starts rising inside. Outside, everything carried on as normal in a way that felt almost cruel. The click of heels in the hallway. Someone calling out, followed by soft bursts of laughter. His bag sat on the luggage rack across from me. Dark blue canvas leather straps slightly worn. Something I had once chosen carefully, as if I were choosing a piece of our life together. I stood up. The zipper gave a small metallic sound as it opened, but in the quiet of the room it felt louder, like something being torn. Inside was a hotel keycard. Not ours. I knew that instantly, in the way the body recognizes something before the mind can explain it. Behind it, a folded receipt. Room service for 2. A bottle of wine. I recognized one I had ordered before with my best friend on special occasions. And at the bottom, a photograph. I didn't need to look closely to know what I was holding. If you followed me this far, you're probably wondering the same thing I was in that moment. Whether to keep going or stop right there, at the edge where everything hadn't fully collapsed yet. I didn't stop. I set the photograph down, face down, as if not looking at it could somehow stop what I had just seen from solidifying into truth. I waited for a reaction. A drop. A crash. A wave of panic big enough to sweep everything away. But it didn't come. Instead, something else spread through me. A strange, quiet. Not emptiness, but stillness, like the surface of water after something has just sunk beneath it. I noticed my hands weren't shaking. My breathing was steady. Everything inside me was functioning with an almost frightening precision. I looked back at the bag. At the room. At myself in the mirror, as if checking whether anything had shattered. Nothing had. Only something subtle had shifted quietly but irreversibly. An invisible line had just been redrawn. Between before and after. Between what I believed and what I had just seen. I understood that I could scream right then. Call him. Bang on her door. Do everything people usually do when they've been betrayed. But I didn't. Because somewhere deeper than emotion, a part of me remained very calm. And it had already started thinking. It didn't want to destroy everything blindly. It wanted to understand first. Before deciding what truly deserved to be broken. And that thought led me somewhere I never expected my mind to go in that moment. Not to myself, but to him, the man who would be standing in a suit in just a few hours in front of an altar. The one who spoke about her in that particular tone people only use when they believe they've found the right person. I had seen that look in his eyes too many times to pretend it wasn't real. The note was still on the bed. The photograph still turned face down. But their meaning could no longer be hidden. If I stayed silent. If I acted like I had never seen anything. If I walked out there, smiled, raised a glass, and clapped as she stepped down the aisle, then I wouldn't just be protecting a secret. I would be helping create a promise that wasn't real. The thought wasn't loud. Not dramatic. But it was so clear it was almost impossible to deny. I felt something tighten inside me. Not from pain but from a decision slowly taking shape. Not every truth needs to be spoken. But some truths, if left unspoken, cost far more in the end. And I knew with unsettling clarity. I was standing right on that line. I didn't confront him right away. I asked him to come up to the room. That was all. A short message like so many others over the past 6 years. No warning. No hint of what was waiting behind that door. He arrived 8 minutes later. Still in the dress shirt he planned to wear for the ceremony, tie half done, his face so calm that if I hadn't already known I would have believed everything was still exactly where it belonged. I handed him the note. Just looked at him. Said nothing. I watched his face the way you watch a hairline crack in a wall, waiting to see if it spreads. The first time he read it he frowned. The second time slower. And then something shifted. Not panic. Not anger. Just a slight pause, like one part of him had already accepted something the rest hadn't yet managed to deny. Who sent this, he asked, his voice careful. The question passed through me like something that no longer mattered. I think you know, I said. Not loud, but enough that there was no going back. If you had been in that room at that moment you would have understood that some answers don't need to be spoken to be seen. And I had already seen mine. I knew the answer before he even opened his mouth. But I still needed to hear it. Not to understand, but to confirm that what had just shifted inside me was real. That I wasn't imagining some alternate version of my life. He sat down on the edge of the bed. The distance between us wasn't far, but it was enough for me to feel unmistakably that something had slipped out of its familiar place. Since when I asked, my voice was so steady it surprised even me. He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched just long enough for every possibility to pass through my mind and quietly eliminate itself. 7 months, he said. No hesitation. No denial. Just a number placed between us like something immovable. 7 months. I repeated it in my head, not to remember, but to feel its weight. 7 months. While I was still there. Still trusting. Still living a life I believed was ours. If you've ever received a truth too late, you'll understand this feeling. It isn't pain right away. It's everything beginning to rearrange itself into a new order where what once felt certain now feels unfamiliar. And in that moment I knew. There wasn't a single answer left that could bring us back to what we had been. I thought I would have to convince her. That there would be arguments, denial, anger, or at least an attempt to hold everything together for a few more hours. Just enough for the ceremony to go on as if nothing had cracked beneath the surface. But no. She stared at her phone for a long time, then closed her eyes like someone who had finally reached a point of no return. I have to tell him, she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't shake. It was simply a decision that had finally found its way out. In that moment something inside me paused. Not from complete surprise but from the realization that she had known. Before I ever walked into that room. She just hadn't been brave enough to act on it. She removed her veil and placed it carefully on the vanity as if she were setting down a version of herself. Then she picked up her phone. I stepped outside. The door closed so softly it almost made no sound, but I knew that on the other side something was breaking in a way that couldn't be repaired. His voice at first was still normal. Then slower. Then, silence. Out in the hallway, I sat down. And for the first time that morning I understood. Not all endings arrive with noise. Some begin with a quiet phone call, yet carry enough weight to stop an entire wedding. Everything that followed felt as if someone had turned the volume of the world down. No music. No applause. Only announcements delivered in careful professional voices, as if speaking softly might dull the sharpness of the truth. Asterisk. The ceremony will not take place. Asterisk. Just that one sentence. But it was enough to make over 100 people out there stop mid-expectation, suspended in the plans they had carried with them. I didn't stay to hear their reactions. I walked out to the vineyard behind the resort where rows of bare vines stretched in clean lines under the thin midday light. The space was wide and quiet enough that I could hear my own footsteps. He found me there after a while. We stood side by side, but we didn't touch. Between us it wasn't distance anymore. It was everything that had just been brought into the light. He said he was sorry. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't respond right away. Because I understood that some apologies aren't meant to fix anything. They exist simply to acknowledge that something has ended. And that the only thing left is to decide where the rest of your life begins again. The days that followed weren't loud the way I once imagined. There was no climax, no clear moment of moving on, just a quiet that lasted long enough for me to finally hear myself. The house felt bigger with only one person in it, but strangely it wasn't as empty as I thought it would be. Each morning I woke up and realized I was standing in front of a choice that was both simple and incredibly difficult. To keep everything that happened as a wound, or to use it as a starting point. I didn't choose once. I chose again every day. And if you're listening to this story, maybe you're standing in front of a door, too unsure whether you should open it. Trust your instincts. Not every fear needs to be avoided. Some fears are trying to tell you something important. The truth may hurt you, but living inside something untrue will cost you far more. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories about those moments we almost walk past but that end up changing everything, stay and subscribe, because sometimes the next thing you need to hear is exactly what you were about to ignore.